I'll never forget the way he screamed. That's what sticks with me most this big. Strong guy brought to his knees in the middle of a courtroom, begging not for himself but for his unborn child. That's when I knew everything had gone too far.
It all started when my friend Jamal got involved with Katie. We all grew up in the same town.
But it was one of those places where your skin color decided a lot about how people saw you. Jamal was one of the good ones, though always working hard, always respectful. And Katie? She was the daughter of Henry Prescott, a guy who seemed to own half the town. Prescott wasn't just rich, he was the kind of rich that let him bend rules and break people. Nobody thought much of it when Jamal and Katie started hanging out. She was the kind of girl who didn't care about rules, always chasing excitement. And Jamal, well, he was her latest thrill. But when Katie got pregnant, everything changed. At first, Jamal tried to do the right thing. He wasn't running from it. He told her he'd be there for her, that he wanted to be a father. But Katie's dad found out. And that's when the nightmare began. One night, cops showed up at Jamal's door. They said he'd stolen something from Prescott's estate, a watch or something. It was a total lie, but they dragged him out in handcuffs anyway. Turns out Prescott had planted it, set the whole thing up just to get rid of Jamal. I remember sitting in the courtroom, watching Prescott sit there with this smug look on his face. Like he'd already won. Jamal's lawyer tried to fight, but Prescott's team was too good. The judge handed Jamal a 5-year sentence like it was nothing. Katie sat there crying, but she didn't say a word. After Jamal was taken away, things started unraveling. Katie had the baby, a little boy named Malik. She wanted to raise him, but her dad stepped in again, said she wasn't fit to be a mother, that the kid would be better off adopted out. Katie fought back this time, but Prescott had connections, and Katie lost custody. Here's the twist. Though karma doesn't miss, not even a guy like Henry Prescott. A few months after Jamal went to prison, the feds came knocking on Prescott's door. Turns out, he'd been involved in some shady business deals, tax fraud, embezzlement, the works. They froze his assets, shut down his companies, and dragged him into court. Suddenly, the guy who had ruined Jamal's life was sitting in the same courtroom, but this time he wasn't calling the shots. Prescott went to prison for 10 years. His name, his money, his power, it all crumbled. Katie. She ended up tracking down Jamal when he got out. She apologized, said she'd been too scared to stand up to her dad, but wanted to make things right. Jamal didn't trust her at first, but when she brought Malik to meet him for the first time, I saw a look on his face I hadn't seen in years. He didn't scream that day, he didn't cry. He just held his son, and for once things felt like they might actually be okay. I guess that's what stays with me, not just the scream, but what came after, the way life has a funny way of balancing things out. Even when it takes way too long, Jamal wasn't the same guy when he got out of prison. 5 years behind bars can change anyone. And it hit him hard. He came out quieter, more guarded. But when he held Malik for the first time, it was like a spark reignited. I think that kid saved him in a way no one else could. Katie stuck around. She'd lost a lot, too. Her relationship with her dad was beyond repair. And with his money gone, she wasn't living the cushy life anymore. But she didn't seem to care. She moved into a small apartment in the city and worked at a diner while trying to figure things out. She kept showing up for Jamal and Malik. Though, and slowly, Jamal let his guard down. It wasn't easy. Jamal had a record now, and that meant every job application felt like a brick wall. People in our town weren't exactly forgiving, even with Prescott gone. The system still seemed rigged against guys like Jamal. He took whatever work he could get: cleaning, construction, anything to put food on the table. One day he came to me and said, "I don't want Malik growing up feeling like he's already lost. I got to do better for him." That's when he started working on this little barbershop idea he'd had since we were kids. It wasn't much, just a tiny space with 2 chairs and a mirror, but it was his. Word got around that Jamal was opening up a spot, and people started showing up. Not everyone, of course, but enough. Katie helped out with the business side of things, turns out. Growing up in a billionaire's world teaches you a thing or two about running things. She kept the books, handled the permits, and even painted the shop herself. Jamal called it Malik's Place. And it became more than just a barber shop. It became a spot where people came to talk, laugh, and feel like they mattered. Meanwhile, Henry Prescott's name was still making headlines. But for all the wrong reasons, more of his dirty dealings came to light, and the press tore into him, his old friends. They vanished as soon as his money did, last I heard. he's sitting in some federal prison, still trying to act like he's better than everyone else. Jamal never said much about Prescott after he got out. One time I asked him if he felt like he'd gotten justice. He just shrugged and said, "Justice would have been not getting locked up in the first place." He had a point. What happened to Prescott didn't erase what Jamal went through. It didn't give him back those years or fix the scars he carried. But watching Jamal rebuild his life piece by piece, seeing him pour everything into being a good father and creating a place where people felt seen, that felt like something close to justice, Malik's place kept growing. Jamal started hiring other guys from the neighborhood who'd been through tough breaks, giving them a shot when no one else would. Malik, now a bright-eyed little boy, was always running around the shop, pretending to cut hair with a toy clipper. One day, Katie walked in holding Malik's hand. She had this shy smile, like she was nervous about something. She looked at Jamal and said, "We should do this together, for real, all of it." Jamal didn't answer right away. He just stared at her, like he was trying to decide if he could trust her with his heart after everything. Finally, he nodded and said, "Okay, let's try." And they did. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still hard days and old wounds that didn't fully heal, but they built something solid, something real. Jamal, Katie, and Malik became a family, not because it was easy, but because they chose to be, sometimes. I walk past the shop and see Jamal standing by the window, watching Malik sweep up hair clippings like it's the most important job in the world. He always looks so proud, and I can't help but feel it too. Life's not fair. But sometimes it gives you moments like that. Moments that remind you how much strength it takes to keep going and how beautiful it can be when you do. As the years rolled by, the story of Jamal, Katie, and Malik became something of a legend in our town. People who once whispered about them with judgment started to see them differently. They weren't just a cautionary tale or gossip fodder anymore. They were an example of resilience, love, and change. Malik grew up with a fire in him. Maybe it came from seeing his dad work so hard, or from knowing the challenges his family had faced. By the time he was in middle school, he was already talking about becoming a lawyer. "I'm going to help people like Dad," he told me one day when I stopped by the shop. Jamal just laughed, ruffling Malik's hair. "You better aim higher than me, kid. You're going to change the world." And Malik believed it. Katie went back to school. Earning a degree in social work, she started working with families who were struggling, trying to make sure no one else lost their kids the way she almost lost Malik. She still helped out at the shop when she could, but her real passion was helping others find their footing. Jamal's barbershop became a hub for the community. It wasn't just a place to get a haircut anymore. It was a space where kids could come after school to do homework, where local leaders held meetings, and where people found support when they needed it most. Jamal started hosting workshops, teaching young men how to cut hair and manage a business. He wanted to give them the tools he never had growing up. And the best part? Malik's place started to inspire other businesses. A bakery opened down the street, run by a single mom who used to stop by the shop for advice. A mechanic shop popped up next door, run by another guy Jamal had helped get back on his feet. Slowly but surely, the neighborhood transformed. But life has a way of testing you. Even when things are looking up, one day, out of nowhere, a letter arrived at the shop. It was from Prescott. Jamal didn't open it right away. He just stared at the envelope for a long time, like it was some kind of trap. Finally, Katie sat down next to him and said, "You don't have to read it if you don't want to." But Jamal did. The letter was short and cold. Just like Prescott, he apologized not because he wanted to, but because he thought it might help him get parole. He claimed he was a changed man and asked Jamal to write a letter supporting his release. Jamal laughed bitterly when he read it. A changed man. That guy doesn't know the meaning of the word. Katie and I didn't say anything. We let him sit with it for a while. Finally, he folded the letter and said, "He can rot where he is. I'm not wasting another second of my life on him." And that was that. By the time Malik was in high school, Jamal's life looked completely different from the one Prescott tried to destroy. Malik was thriving. Katie was happier than I'd ever seen her. And the shop was doing better than ever. One day, I asked Jamal if he ever thought about what happened, about the years he lost and the pain he went through. He shrugged and said, "Sometimes. But then I look at Malik, at Katie, at this place, and I think maybe everything had to happen the way it did. I wouldn't be who I am now if it didn't." It wasn't the answer I expected, but it made sense. Jamal didn't get justice the way most people think of it. There was no big courtroom win or public apology, but he got something better. He built a life that couldn't be taken away, and in doing so, he became the kind of man who could inspire everyone around him to do the same. Now, whenever I walk past Malik's place, I see that little boy, all grown up, cutting hair next to his dad, laughing like they don't have a care in the world, and I think to myself, this is what justice looks like, not just for one man, but for everyone he touches. It's not perfect, it never is, but it's real. And sometimes that's enough. Malik's place wasn't just a barbershop anymore, it was a symbol. Over the years, people from outside the neighborhood started coming in. Drawn by the stories they'd heard about Jamal and his journey, Malik, now in college studying pre-law, had become something of a local hero. He worked at the shop during breaks, but his heart was set on becoming an attorney. One summer evening, while Malik was sweeping up, a man walked into the shop. He looked out of place, wearing a cheap suit that didn't quite fit and carrying an air of hesitation. At first, nobody paid him much attention, but when Jamal turned around and saw him, the room fell silent. It was Henry Prescott. The years hadn't been kind to him. He looked frail. His once commanding presence was now a shadow of what it used to be. For a moment, nobody moved. Jamal's hands clenched at his sides, and I could see the tension in his jaw. Prescott cleared his throat, his voice shaky. Jamal, I need to talk to you, Katie, who had been sitting in the corner doing paperwork, stood up. You need to leave, she said firmly, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. But Jamal raised a hand, stopping her. Let him talk, he said quietly. Prescott nodded, taking a shaky step forward. I came to apologize for everything, for what I did to you, to Katie, to Malik. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to say it anyway. Jamal stared at him for what felt like forever. The shop was so quiet. You could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Finally, Jamal spoke. You think an apology fixes this? His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it that made everyone sit up straighter. You think saying sorry gives me back the years I lost or erases what you put my family through? Prescott dropped his gaze, his shoulders slumping. No, I've lost everything, my money, my reputation, my health. I thought maybe I could at least try to make things right. Jamal shook his head, his face unreadable. You didn't come here to make things right. You came here because you're looking for peace. You don't get to use me to find it. Prescott flinched like he'd been slapped. He opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it again, realizing there was nothing he could say. Jamal took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. I don't hate you, Prescott. I don't even think about you anymore. That's your punishment. You don't matter to me, not anymore. With that, Jamal nodded toward the door. Now get out. Prescott hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked out of the shop without another word. Malik, who had been watching the whole thing from the corner, looked up at his dad. Why didn't you tell him off more? He asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Jamal smiled faintly and put a hand on Malik's shoulder. Because anger gives him power, and I'm not giving him that, not now, not ever. That moment stuck with all of us. It wasn't a dramatic showdown or a perfect ending. It was just real and complicated. Like life always is, Jamal didn't need Prescott's apology to move on. He had already found his peace in the life he built, in the family he loved, and in the community he helped grow years later. When Malik graduated from law school and passed the bar exam, Jamal threw the biggest party the neighborhood had ever seen. The shop was packed, music spilling out into the streets. And Malik stood in the middle of it all, grinning like he couldn't believe it was real. During his speech, Malik looked at Jamal and said, Everything I've done, everything I've accomplished is because of you. You showed me what it means to fight, to stand tall, and to never let anyone tell you your worth. I hope I can make you as proud of me as I am of you. Jamal didn't cry, he never did, but you could see the pride in his eyes as he hugged his son. Malik's place is still there, still thriving. Jamal spends more time teaching than cutting hair these days. And Katie runs a nonprofit helping young mothers and families. Malik is a lawyer now, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Every time I walk past that shop, I think about how far they've come, how far we've all come. Jamal didn't just survive, he built something that lasts, something that lifts others up, and if you ask me, that's the best kind of justice there is. A few years later, life brought another twist that none of us saw coming. It started with a phone call that Katie received at the shop one quiet afternoon. I was there, sitting in the corner, waiting for my cut. while Jamal tinkered with a busted light fixture. Katie's face turned pale as she listened to the voice on the other end of the line. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. "It's Prescott," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jamal looked up, frowning. "What about him?" "He's dying," she replied. "Stage 4 cancer. He's in hospice, and he wants to see us." The room fell silent. None of us knew what to say. Jamal finally broke the silence. "Us?" Katie nodded. "He wants to see Malik, too." Jamal's face hardened. "No, Malik doesn't need to see that man." Katie didn't argue, but later that night, "Malik overheard us talking about it. Why shouldn't I go?" Malik asked. "He's my grandfather, isn't he? Even if he's a terrible person, I should at least hear him out." Jamal shook his head. "He's not your grandfather. He gave up that right a long time ago. The only reason he wants to see you now is because he's scared of what's waiting for him on the other side." Malik crossed his arms, a stubborn look on his face that reminded me so much of Jamal. It almost made me laugh, maybe, but if I don't go, I'll wonder about it for the rest of my life. I need to do this for me, not for him. Jamal didn't like it. But he respected Malik's decision. A few days later, Katie and Malik made the trip to the hospice facility where Prescott was staying. Jamal refused to go, and I could tell it was tearing him up inside. He spent the entire day pacing around the shop, snapping at anyone who tried to talk to him. When Katie and Malik came back that evening, they were quiet. Malik's face was unreadable, but Katie's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "What happened?" Jamal asked, his voice tight. Katie glanced at Malik, who nodded, giving her permission to speak. He wasn't the same man we remembered. He was frail, confused, scared. He kept saying he was sorry, over and over again. But it wasn't really about us. It was about him. Malik stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. I told him I don't hate him, that I'm not carrying that weight around because it's not mine to carry. I told him I have a good life, a great dad, and that I'm proud of who I am. He didn't deserve my forgiveness, but I gave it to him anyway, because it's what you taught me to do. Jamal's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue, but then he pulled Malik into a hug, his voice breaking as he said, "You're a better man than I'll ever be." Prescott passed away a few days later. There was no grand reconciliation, no redemption arc. His death was quiet, like the fading of a shadow that had loomed over their lives for too long. But something shifted after that. It was like a weight had been lifted, not just for Jamal and Malik, but for all of us who had watched this story unfold over the years. Malik graduated law school not long after, and his first big case was against a landlord who was illegally evicting tenants in a struggling neighborhood. Watching him stand in court, confident and passionate, was like watching Jamal's fight come full circle. Katie's nonprofit expanded, helping more families than ever. Jamal turned Malik's place into a full-blown community center, complete with a library, tutoring programs, and job training workshops. One day, Jamal and I were sitting outside the shop, watching the kids from the neighborhood play basketball in the court Malik had helped build. Jamal leaned back in his chair, a rare smile on his face. "Funny, isn't it?" he said. "What's that?" I asked. "How life turns out," he said, nodding toward Malik, who was coaching some of the younger kids on the court. "I spent so much time being angry about what I lost, but I didn't realize how much I gained. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because in that moment, it was clear Jamal hadn't just built a life for himself. He'd built a legacy, one that would outlast him, outshine the pain of the past, and inspire everyone who walked through the doors of Malik's place. Justice, love, resilience. They weren't just words anymore. They were alive, breathing in that little corner of the world that Jamal had transformed, and I was lucky enough to witness it all.